Welcome to the Avodas HaParsha shiur that took place last night in beautiful Kilas Neir Avraham in Shari Chesed Yerushalayim. For some reason, Ashgacha worked out that the sound wasn't recorded when we recorded the shiur there. So I'm going to try to go over the shiur again. Something always lacking without the members of the Chabura there, but since they were there with me yesterday, hopefully they'll continue to give me strength and hopefully wisdom. So when we approach Parshas Terumah, I always introduce it by saying that many people get disappointed. In other words, there was so much excitement and meaning in the Parshas from Bereshis through the Parshas of Yetzias Mitzrayim, Matan Torah, even the Parshas of Mishpatim, dealing with so many laws that are intricate and complicated, but they're in our world of Ben Adam Lachavero, that we know and recognize. When it comes to Terumah, so people have the problem that first of all it gets very, very technical, and this is not just Terumah, but Terumah and Tetzaveh, Vayakol Pekudei, Partzak, so even all about the Mishkan, and technical details, measurements and amounts and materials and connecting. That's one thing that bothers people because they don't see how they get inspired by it. They don't see if the Torah is Torah's Chaim, from a lashon of hora'ah, of teaching, what is it teaching us? Added to that is the sense that this is not an action item for us right now. We're not building the Mishkan. The Mishkan that was built then is nignas, is hidden, and the Sfas Emes says it still projects, it still transmits powers to Am Yisrael from where it's hidden, but we're not building it right now. So clearly, it is part of the Torah, and it's the eternal Torah. We have to find aspects where we can access the instructions the Torah is giving us and learn and see as much as we can. There are some Mefarshim that bring down the deeper aspects of every item in the Mishkan, whether the particular material, the particular color, the numbers, the measurements. One is the Malbim, right, who has a whole separate perush explaining the pnimius of the ideas of the Mishkan. Now we know the Sfas Emes says, from Shamayim, something is given and not taken back, meaning that the Mishkan is here, and the Avoda of the Mishkan are equivalent of the Avoda, what Chazal referred to as Neshama Parim Srasenu, that our lips in learning the Torah of the Mishkan, the Beis HaMikdash, the Korbanos, are able to fill in that which is missing for us. So we have to try to see and learn, and even from small examples, when we get to see the depth of what's there, then it lets us understand that every aspect of the Mishkan has such depth. So I want to focus, as we usually do, on one very small item in the Parsha, and we're going to go along with the Divrei Yisrael of Modzitz, learning even parts of it inside, in order to see what the Oros Tchoshim were and what they teach us. Now, Rashi brings down a fascinating thing with these Oros Tchoshim, the hides of Tchoshim that were part of the covering of the Mishkan. Rashi says, Tchoshim, and it's based on Chazal and the Gemara, Tchoshim min chaya, v'lo haisa ela l'sha'a. It was a particular type of animal that only existed at this time, meaning it came into existence to be used for the Mishkan, and that was it. Unlike other animals that came about from the time of Bereshis, and unless human beings made them extinct, continue on in their species. Now, what was unique about the tachash, about that animal, was that its pelt, its hide, its fur, was multicolored. As Rashi says it, harbe gevonim hayula. There were many different hues to it. The kach metargim sasgona. Therefore, Rashi says the Targum in Aramaic of that animal, it's called sasgona, which Rashi explains means sas umispara bigvanim shalo, that it rejoices and it glorifies itself with its many colors. So, first of all, there's a principle that I'd seen that when you look at something and it has a unique aspect, that unique aspect is really giving a very important particular message about that item or event. So even though the Mishkan had many wonderful materials of gold and silver and jewels, etc., this was the one material that existed only for and only in the Mishkan. So therefore it must have a unique message for us about the Mishkan. So the Divrei Yisrael starts by quoting the Zohar HaKadosh, who explains that there's a correspondence between the universe, the human being, and the Mishkan. He says, Tziyura de'uvda de'breshis, the form, the layout, the image of Maisa Bereshis, meaning the universe, v'tziyura de Mishkana, and that of the Mishkan, v'tziyura de Barnash, and that of a human being, chad inun. They are all one, meaning you can point to an aspect of the universe, find the corresponding aspect in the Mishkan, find the corresponding aspect in a human being. Now, many of the materials that are described in the Mishkan are explained by Chazal as what they mean in the world of the human being. For example, Tziyur de Zohav v'Kesef shel Mishkan, he said if you look at Zohav and Kesef, those parallel the midos of Yira and Ahava. So those things are known. So too with Nechoshes and so too with other materials. However, Oros Tchoshim, because they existed only at this point, there was no explanation given of what the correspondence is to this within the human being. So he explains the following. He quotes Chazal, Ezehu Ashir, it says in Pirkei Avos, the famous Mishnah, who is wealthy? Hasameach bechelko. Someone who is happy with his portion, with his lot. I once heard that, I think it was Rabbi Lehman, the Rav in Germany, who wrote a 3-volume Parish on Pirkei Avos, said, why did Chazal phrase some of these Mishnayos with a question instead of just making a statement? Say, Ha'ashir hu hasamech b'chelko. A wealthy man is someone who is happy with his portion. Why'd they ask the question? Because he wanted us to walk through that pathway until we reach that conclusion. Our usual response when someone says, who's wealthy? Somebody with lots of money. How much money? $1 million? That's not really that wealthy. 10 million? He still can't have everything he wants. Fine, 100 million. Now, what if he has $100 million and his wife hates him? When you say you would like to be rich, would you like to be that person? Say, no, that's not what I meant. What if he has $100 million, but he has a chronic illness that causes him great pain? When you say you want to be rich, would you like to be that person? No. So what do you mean when you say you want to be rich? You want to be happy. And that is accessed by being samech bechelko. Now here, the Divrei Yisrael says this is not just applying to your material possessions, but applies to your situations in life. He says, and he brings this from Rashi, B'chelik she'HaKadosh Baruch Hu mazmin lo, the portion that Hashem gives you, arranges for you to get, bein tov bein ra, whether good or bad, bein rav bein ma'at, whether a lot or a little, hakol notel ba'ayin yofeh. He takes that which he has given with ayin yofeh, meaning that you see the good in that which you're given. Everything in the world has its good aspects and its less good aspects. It depends on what you're going to see. There's a famous story brought by Rabbeinu Yonah about two Talmidim who were walking and they saw in the street or by the street the carcass of a dead donkey. And one said, that is the most disgusting thing I've seen in my life. The other one said, but it has such nice white teeth. So the Rav who was there said that you, the one who noticed the white teeth, are going to be a great person in Am Yisrael. Because that's the midah of Ayin Tova, to identify something by its good aspect, whatever you can find, whatever it is, so that enables a person to be Sameach B'chelko. He brings from an interesting early sefer, I've never heard of the name before, I'd like to look up more about it. It's called Igeres HaTiyul, the letter, the document of the Tiyul, of the hike or journey. He says that the word Chelko, for Asamech B'chelko, as Rashi Tevos, right? It's an acronym for the following. Ches is Cham, hot. Lamed is Lach, humid. Kuf is Kar, cold. Yovesh, right? He uses the Vav to introduce Yovesh, meaning dry, meaning all the different types of climates and seasons. Asamech B'chelko, a person who can be happy with that. So this means, again, not only material possessions, but also the adventures, he calls it the harpatkos, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu sends him on in life. Nobody's life is the way they expected it to be. Nobody ends up exactly where they thought they were going to be. And there are going to be times in which it's hot, in which it's cold, right? In which it's better and worse, more challenging. And for a person to take that with an ayin yafa and simcha, based on the understanding and the bitachon that this is the situation that best enables me to do what I'm supposed to do in this world. Now, please note, this doesn't mean that a person is supposed to be passive. It doesn't mean that if Hashem arranges for you to get strep throat, you're supposed to say, I'm not going to take antibiotics because Hashem obviously wants me to have strep throat. No, Hashem wants you to go through that process. He gives you strep throat. You're supposed to go and get examined, take your medication, recover, and all of that has a purpose in your life and what you're going to be doing. So here he says this is inside the human being the equivalent of the tachash. That creature which rejoiced in its multiple colors, in its many colors, that is parallel to a human being who can rejoice and see with an ayin tova the different aspects of his life, the different situations which are there. Now here, he asks another interesting question. We know that aside from the machzis shekel, in which everyone had to give the same amount, the other donations for the Mishkan, people were able to give freely, and they gave a lot to the extent that Moshe Rabbeinu had to tell them that's enough. And they gave gold and silver and all the materials which were there. Where did they have it? So it says in the Psukim that they went out of Mitzrayim with all of these precious things. But clearly they didn't go out with tchoshim because the tchoshim didn't exist yet. So when we find that people donated, it says, Hashem says, take from them, and it finishes, v'oros tchoshim. So who were the people that had oros tchoshim? How did they get them? That they were the ones who would then donate. If there were people who went out to, so to speak, hunt these tchoshim who were there, why was that even their job? There were people who were in charge of building the Mishkan, Betzalel, Aholiav, and all those who helped them. So they should have been the one who went to get these things directly for the project of the Mishkan. Why should a private person first get it and then donate it? And this is referred to again and again. He says later in Parshas Vayakel, when it sums up the Mishkan, right? And again, the Ramban in his introduction to Sefer Shmo says that the Geula is only complete really when the Shechina came to rest in the Mishkan, and that's what's summarized in Vayakel and Pekudei. It says, Chol isha shenimtza ito, every person who had with him, that was found by him, tcheles vargoman, oros elim, v'oros tchoshim heviu. There were some people who had the hides, the pelt, the fur of the tchoshim, and they brought them. Asher nimtza ito. Why should certain people have had this as opposed to everyone, or as opposed to just those building the Mishkan? So he explains the following. He says, certainly the tchoshim, when they appeared, were hefker in the midbar. They were ownerless. Nonetheless, not every person who wanted to trap a tachash was able to get one. It was only someone that HaKadosh Baruch Hu arranged for him to get these tchoshim. Now, he proposes the following. Who would be a person who's worthy of getting the tachash? It says in Sefer Devarim, it says, Lo yechdal evyon mikerev haaretz. It says there's never a time in which there aren't poor people in the land. Meaning, even though Chazal say that so many Jews came out with donkeys full of treasure, he says we can assume that there were some that were lazy, didn't pick it up, lost what they had, all the assorted things which are there, who were poor. So here they're collecting for the Mishkan. The wealthy people are bringing the gold and the silver and all of these things. What could this ani give? What could this person give? It could be a time of terrible depression. An amazing thing is happening. Everyone is taking part, and you don't, right? It even says by the machzis shekel, right? Ha'ani lo yarbe, a poor person can't give more, implying that there were poor people. And the Sfas Emes brings down that a wealthy person could even help out by giving the machzis shekel for a poor person who really had nothing. So if this person who's stuck without anything during this huge time of giving and joyful giving, if he can be sameach b'chelko, if he can say, this is the situation that I'm in. This is my portion. Somehow this is a role that I'm playing in the building of the Mishkan, being the one who has nothing. And he can be sos bigvanim shelo, and he can be happy with the colors and hues of his life. There are times in which I may have been wealthy. There are times in which I may be wealthy. I was a slave in Egypt. I'm not a slave in Egypt anymore. I was just at Matan Torah. And the person can rejoice with those joyful colors that are there in his life, and he didn't fight against it, what's called dochik es hasho. Sometimes we spend so much energy fighting against our situation. It shouldn't be. It's not right. Why me, etc. He says he didn't do that. Hizmin lo HaKadosh Baruch Hu v'himtzi lebeso k'midoso asatacha shesos bigvanim shelo. That person would go out of his tent in the morning, and there'd be a tachash waiting for him. Those were the people whose midos corresponded to that of the tachash, and that's what they were able to give. So he says this is the aspect that they have that corresponds inside a human being to the idea of the tachash. Now, it's interesting that there's a similar type of approach which is there, that the tachash also represents the colors of Am Yisrael. Let's explain. We know that Am Yisrael Shvatim were divided up depending on the stone on their place in the Bigdei Kohen Gadol, the flag that they had. Those all had a particular color. The Mishkan, when Am Yisrael camped, the Mishkan was always in the middle of Am Yisrael. It was always there, meaning even though Am Yisrael had these different colors, so there was a unifying force, which is the Torah. And the Torah, we once learned this Vasemes in Vayigash. He explains the Torah is meant to spread out into 13 different pathways, like the Yud Gimel Midos. The Rabbi Shmuel darshan the Torah. He says because Yaakov Avinu is the midah of Torah. Titen emes li Yaakov. Emes is Torah. And the Shvatim were meant to spread out from him, 13, after the division of Menashe and Ephraim. And that 13 is Gematria Echad. So the fact that there are different approaches within Am Yisrael, legitimate Torah approaches which are there, and they all revolve around the Torah which is in the Mishkan, and their purpose is all to bring the Hashras HaShechina to Am Yisrael, so those are something to rejoice in. The Mishkan was a place of joy. The Beis HaMikdash was a place of joy. Yerushalayim was a place of joy. And in fact, I saw Reb Shimon Greenfield, one of the Gedolim of Hungary, said the reason Kohanim are supposed to distance themselves from death is because when Am Yisrael came up to the Beis HaMikdash, they were supposed to be the Kohanim involved in joyful service of Hashem, in a joyful avoda. So part of the joy of the Mishkan, of the Beis HaMikdash, is this idea of everyone bringing something to the table, even as they're different. A person can rejoice in what he has, even though it may not be as great or significant as what it seems the other person has. Chazal say that just as the faces of every human being are different, from the beginning of creation till the end, there's never been anyone with my face. There never will be. Even identical twins, the parents quickly learn little subtle differences that let them identify each twin. And Chazal said, just as their partzuf, their face, is different and unique, so too Deosei and Shavos. So too their inner world, their understanding, their feeling, their connection to Torah, to Avodas Hashem, is different. That's unique for each person. And a person has to learn to rejoice in that, and to rejoice in the fact that other people also have these unique approaches and positions. It's going to be important to get ready for Aliyah L'Regel. The Talmud Rebbe often points this out. He says at Aliyah L'Regel, so everyone comes. Everyone comes to Yerushalayim. Everyone comes to the Beis HaMikdash. There's not going to be a Nusach Sfard Beis HaMikdash and a Nusach Ashkenaz Beis HaMikdash. There's going to be one. And people are going to come with their different approaches, different nigunim, different svarim, different foods, all sorts of things. And all of that is supposed to mix into an experience of usmachtim lifnei Hashem Elokeichem, of rejoicing before Hashem, not despite having to pack in with all these other Jews that are often unfamiliar to you, but particularly because of it, that's part of the simcha that it's supposed to be there. So this is a very instructive part of the Mishkan for us. We see that the tchoshim were there for a particular period of time. And that also gives us the message that there are going to be different sha'os in your life, different times, different moments. And you have to try to live in that moment, not fight against it, not to be dochek the shah, but to live in that moment the best you can. It doesn't mean you ignore pain. It doesn't mean that you ignore things that cause anguish, but it means that you focus still on that which is positive, and the understanding that if this situation is here, somehow I'm meant to be able to do something in this situation, and that itself can make the situation good. So as we approach this Shabbos and reading the idea of Terumah, they say once again when we read the Parshas, all of these things awaken. We have to awaken the tachash inside of us. And if times are difficult for us, try to think of that Jew who at the time of Terumas HaMishkan had nothing, while everyone else was bringing precious things and wonderful things, would be part of that eternal creation. And if he was able to be happy with what he had, even in that situation, even if the situation he was in was his fault, he lost all the treasure from Mitzrayim, he didn't bother to pick up treasure at the Yam Suf, whatever it is, if he can rejoice in that, the tachash comes to him. That is the match of this person's midah and that special creature that HaKadosh Baruch Hu created. May we all be zocher to awaken the tachash inside of us and be zocher to the binyan beis hamikdash, in which we will all come together, usmachtem lifnei Hashem Elokeichem, to rejoice together in our many colors. Have a wonderful Shabbos.